Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us for a special vaccine update on Friday. We have Dr. Peter Hotez with us again today. We're super excited. My name is Dr. Neecey Hudson, Chair and Science Director of Hood Medicine Initiative.
Hello, I'm Jonathan White. I'm the co-founder and Director of Policy for Hood Medicine Initiative.
I'm Doug Slaughter. I'm the Public Health Director.
Hood Medicine Initiative is a collective of scientists, physicians, hackers, and assorted geeks focused on addressing health disparities in Black and Brown communities.
And Hood Med Chats, are our signature events. It's an effort to bring expertise of healthcare professionals and others to those communities. Our goal is simple: help us save us.
Today, we are extremely honored to welcome back Dr. Peter J. Hotez, a professor of pediatrics and molecular biology and microbiology, and the founding dean of the National School of Tropical Medicine at Baylor College of Medicine, where he's also the co-director of Texas Children's Center for Vaccine Development. How are you, Dr. Hotez? Welcome back.
Good. It's wonderful to see you guys again, and we're all still hanging in there, aren't
we?
Right.
Totally.
Yeah.
Beats the alternative, right?
Yes.
Sure. Let's jump right in. We can start with the latest news about Johnson & Johnson and the implications for the vaccine rollout and distribution. Can you kind of put that in perspective for us and talk about the risk of blood clots from COVID, and also with smoking and birth control, and how that might also be similar to the blood clot findings in maybe the AstraZeneca vaccine?
Yes. Well, we're still kind of getting our arms around it. It seems so far right, and it could change, but right now it looks as though for the two major types of vaccines that people are getting here in the U.S. are mRNA vaccines. That's what Moderna and the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine is, or the adenovirus vectored vaccines. That's what the J&J one is here. And then in Europe, they're using the AstraZeneca vaccine. We don't know if the AstraZeneca vaccine will be released in the U.S. or not. But both of those adenovirus vectored vaccines seem to be linked with a very rare and severe clotting disorder called cerebral venous thrombosis. This is a blood clot forming in the veins draining the brain, which causes people to be very sick, and there's even been one death in the United States. And it seems to be what's happening is that adenovirus vectored vaccine is producing a unique type of antibody that activates platelets, consumes all the platelets, and then that causes what's called thrombotic thrombocytopenia. So the good news, it's a very rare event. The bad news is it is a serious one. And the question then becomes, is everyone at equal risk, or is there a specific population that you're concerned about? Because if it's a specific population, then it's only happening to a specific population. In some ways, that's good news, because it means that that's the population you exclude, and then we resume use of the J&J vaccine. And so far, the information we're hearing, it's predominantly premenopausal women, so younger women. And what we don't know is, and this is what I think the reason for the pause is to investigate, well, okay, if it is premenopausal women, is it because they were in the immediate postpartum period, because we know that in general can increase your risk of blood clots, or is it because they're on birth control or smoking? And the best outcome, I think, of all of this is if we could say that, okay, right now it's 1 in a million, but it's really 1 in 10,000 among that specific population. Yeah. We just say we're not going to give that group the J&J vaccine or the AstraZeneca vaccine, then we move forward. But it takes a little time to sort out, and probably the U.S. regulators have to talk to the European and the UK regulators to get that full information. And I think that's what the delay is. The bad news is the more we delay, the more people say there must be a real problem here, and it ramps up concern about the vaccine, and then people don't want to take it. And then I'll say one more thing and I'll be quiet. Then I think the other thing that I worry about is, here in the US, we have choices, right? We have the 2 mRNA vaccines. Maybe we'll get other vaccines. If you're in sub-Saharan Africa right now, That's all you got. I mean, pretty much you've got the J&J, AstraZeneca, or the Russian vaccine, which guess what? It's also an adenovirus vaccine.
Yeah.
Does that cause it too? Well, we don't know because the Russians are pushing it with other low and middle income countries that don't have pharmacovigilance systems. So
Sputnik, right?
we'll never know. That's
That's
Sputnik, right?
Yeah,
So
and I've heard there's some issues with the Sputnik vaccine as well.
it could be easily. So the point is, that's for me, that's where the urgency to work it out, because if we never use the J&J vaccine in the US, it'll be sad, but we can recover from that because we have other choices. But for Africa, then we're in really dire strait. We have our recombinant protein vaccine that we're accelerating. Maybe that'll come through, but it creates a very difficult situation.
You kind of briefly touched on this a bit, but can you speak some more about how this announcement highlights the stringency with which we are approaching these emergency use vaccines? And what I mean by that is one person in over 7 million people has died from the J&J vaccine. 8 folks have been affected by this blood clotting issue, but still we've paused it to do more evaluations. So can you speak to, the importance of doing that?
Well, I think the other way to look at this too is sort of the glass half full, is the fact that our monitoring system, our what we call pharmacovigilance system, is so robust that we were able to pick up a 1 in a million event. And so people should take some comfort for that, because I think the concern that people have is, okay, they get it with the phase 3 trial. There was a lot of oversight, and they, if there are any safety issues in a 30,000 person trial, they'd pick it up. But what if it's a rare event that the phase 3 trial wasn't powered enough to pick up everything? Will we miss it? And the answer is, doesn't look like we'll miss it. We have a very robust system in place that picks it up. So in some ways, people should take some comfort in knowing that the FDA and CDC have put in place a pretty good monitoring system for looking for those kinds of things.
Since we last met, we learned a little bit more about sort of the efficacy of the vaccines that are currently available towards some of the mutants. And the New England Journal of Medicine just published a little bit about the efficacy against at least the 3 that we know of yet that we've had a chance to study so far. But the UK variant, the South African, and the Brazil variant, I mean, you can see that there's a decrease in efficacy across the board. But I thought maybe
is that efficacy, or is that virus neutralizing antibody titers?
Oh yes, it's the neutralizing antibody titers. Yeah.
Yes, because the efficacy is still pretty good, actually. So
this is good. Yeah, go ahead.
But so the point, so here's what's going on. All of these vaccines work by inducing really high levels of virus neutralizing antibody. And the problem is the virus neutralizing antibody against the UK variant is almost as good as the original lineage. It's a little bit of decrease, but more than enough, because there's so much to begin with. There's enough residual there it's still going to protect, and pretty much about the same. The decrease that you're seeing in virus neutralizing antibody against the South African and the Brazil variant, because there's a double mutant, not a single mutant, is a bigger drop, but there's still partial protection. It's just not enough. So, and not as much as you'd like. So it's maybe, instead of being 95% protective, we're talking about 50, 60% protective, and probably a little better against severe infection. But what that means is that right now, the B117 variant is the dominant one across the US. And the good news is all the vaccines seem to work just as well against that one. The problem's going to come later on this year or next year, when the Pfizer and Brazil variant may start revving up again, in which case we'll need a boost. And what a boost will do will be, it'll increase your level of virus neutralizing antibodies, create greater durability of protection, and probably what the companies will do is and this is what we're doing as well, we'll fine tune it to make it more specific for the South African and Brazil variant. And in fact, the Pfizer CEO, I think today or yesterday, said something to that effect. And I think, so you can anticipate that if you got 2 doses of the vaccine, of Pfizer, Moderna, you might be asked to get a third dose later on this year or next year, and maybe a second dose of the J&J or with a different boost. And then we might be done. And this is where the scientific community doesn't have consensus. Some are saying, no, we're going to need a boost every year now with different variants. I see it a little bit differently. I see a lot of convergence around the different variants, all looking about the same. So that may be it for a while. We'll have to see. And then you won't necessarily need a boost every year, but that's the unknown.
And that'll be somewhat determinative by the percentage of the population who gets vaccinated, right?
Yeah, well, it also, well, let's take a step back. What we want to halt virus transmission.
Yeah.
And we potentially could do that by the summer if we get everybody vaccinated. And let's face it, this is why we're here right now, right? We're trying to get everybody vaccinated. And if we do that, I think we can have a really good quality of life. And by virus transmission halting, what it means is you get back something that resembles a normal quality of life. We can get back to music concerts and clubs and restaurants and I know Dr. Hudson's just can't wait to get back to the club. So she's like, I can't take this anymore. I'm getting dressed up and that's going to happen, I think. But everybody's got to get vaccinated. That's the problem. And by the way, and I say that and masks come off and everything else, but we're still going to have to be mindful because one of the things that we may be starting to see, and this is coming out of Mark Lipsich's public health group at Harvard School of Public Health, he's finding that there may be some seasonality to this virus. So we may see a big uptick again in January. So that even though, the masks are coming off, we're going to the clubs and restaurants, the message coming in January, maybe we have to dial it back a little bit and start wearing masks again for a couple of months. But we can live with that. That's not so terrible. We just have to, be calm and just have some situational awareness because it's all kind of fluid, but no question life's going to get better.
I'd like to, talk a little bit about length of immunity. Right? So you may be aware, but the New England Journal of Medicine, there was a new report published this week on antibody responses in people that have that had a past natural infection, and their analysis suggested that those that had never had COVID or were naive, they required 2 doses for that maximum efficacy, but those that had been previously infected only really required 1 dose to have that equivalent antibody titer. So I'd love to know what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. My friend and colleague Eric Topol, who's an important professor at the Scripps Institute in La Jolla, California, he's been pushing on this idea. And so the idea is almost like the first infection, and then resolution of the first infection almost acts like the first immunization, and then all you need is the second, and as a true immunization with the vaccine that acts like the boost. The problem is this: how do you operationalize it? Because imagine imagine here in Houston, you got you're going to the NRG Center, right? This massive football stadium with a gazillion people. How are you gonna operationalize? Okay, who had past infection and what's your evidence for it? Let's show me your antibody levels that you had past infection, so you only need a single immunization. One of the things we learned last year is our health system. Well, in my moments of despair, I say we don't have a health system. We have Amazon Pharmacy, right? But let's face it, our health system cannot tolerate a lot of complexity, and it messes up pretty quickly. And what's interesting is the French are doing this now. In France, that's what they're doing. And I think Eric told me even they're having a lot of problems, and they've got a much more unified national health system than the U.S. does certainly. So, and they're struggling with it. So I think the bottom line, I think it's going to be very hard to implement. And so even though theoretically it's true, I don't know what we do with the information.
Yeah.
Dr. Hotez, just an update on kids and the vaccines. We know that we've seen new trials for adolescents between 12 and 15 with 100% efficacy. First question is, do you think this is attributable to the robustness of their immune systems? And then, the UAA is going to be sent to the FDA, or was sent to the FDA last week, and they hope to have approval by the fall for the new school year. But where does that leave children that are younger than 12 years old? Is there going to be any studies for them, or how do we approach the elementary and the younger kids?
Yeah, so the study that was done for the Pfizer BioNTech vaccine, it wasn't a big study. It was 1,200 kids in the vaccine group, 1,200 in the placebo, and I think there were 18 cases in the vaccinated group. I'm sorry, 18 cases in the controlled placebo group and 0 cases in the vaccinated group. That's how they got to the 100%, but they're still not huge numbers. It won't stay up at 100%, but it's still pretty high. And when you look at the level of virus neutralizing antibody, it looks really good. So I think there's enough there. We should move forward with vaccinating adolescents, and assuming we have enough doses, potentially in the junior high schools, middle schools, high schools, by the fall, you could have a situation where all of the kids are vaccinated, all the teachers and staff, and that's going to go really well for the school year. And even, I think, for the elementary schools, because we won't have the data for the little kids by the fall, I don't think, but we'll have the teachers and staff vaccinated. And if we've brought down community transmission, we can certainly open up the elementary schools safely as well. So a lot to look forward to. I think the safety and efficacy data on little kids will take longer, in part because little kids, if they get COVID-19, there's a small group, around 2,000 kids, develop this very serious condition called, I don't know who comes up with these acronyms, MISC, multi-system inflammatory syndrome of children. And that's interesting because it happens later on in their illness. So it suggests that it's not due to the direct virus, but some kind of host immune response to it. But knowing that may slow you down in terms of vaccine studies, because you'll want to make certain that the vaccine doesn't actually facilitate that or exacerbate it. And it's going to take time. So I don't see the clinical trials in the little kids moving as fast. What we will have, though, I think, is a lot of data on pregnant women. So that's going to be important. And then we're going to also have some data on newborn babies who, because the antibody goes across the placenta, babies will be born with anti-COVID antibodies, so they'll be protected for a while. Mm-hmm. So, and then maybe by next year we'll have enough information to vaccinate little kids, and maybe it'll be given like a measles vaccine, say, which they get at 1 year of age, and that might be a possibility.
So we saw the new publication this week on the low-cost COVID vaccine that you're developing for global distribution to vulnerable nations. We wondered if you could just update us about the progress on what your findings were and what are the next steps for distribution.
Yeah, so this is an older technology, same technology used to make the recombinant hepatitis B vaccine that's been around for 30 plus years, and it's done by microbial fermentation in yeast, and it's used all over the world and with a tremendous safety record. And now we're starting to get clinical data on the vaccine in India where it's being developed. So we transferred the technology to India, and they're scaling up production with this organization called Biological E. They're one of the world's largest vaccine producers, and they're making 1.2 billion doses, which is exciting for us. We've never made 1 billion of anything before, and hopefully that's going to be a game changer for global health. And
that's amazing.
And it could be, and all the stars have to align, of course, and everything has to work out. But if it does, maybe it could fill the gaps if people aren't taking the J&J or the AstraZeneca vaccine. Right. And that's going to be, because right now we don't have a lot to offer. And then we're also, what I'm going to start to push for is if the U.S. government can help produce some of this as well, because, you know, there's a lot of pressure on the U.S. to give away its excess doses, and that's fine, you know, for low and middle income countries, and I think that's fine. But then I remind people, look at the numbers we're talking about. We're talking about 1 billion people, 1.1 billion people in sub-Saharan Africa,
Yeah.
650 million people in Latin America, I don't know, 400 or 500 million people in low-income countries of Asia. That's 2 billion people. That's about 4 or 5 billion doses. Where's that going to come from, right? It's not going to, I mean,
Right.
the mRNA vaccines, they're great vaccines, but one's a Lamborghini, the other one's a McLaren, right? You can't, it's
Great analogy.
you can't scale that thing up, right? I mean, and so you're not gonna make 4 billion Lamborghinis and McLarens, you know, but you can make 4 billion Toyotas and Hyundais, right? So,
Nice.
and that's what we made. So,
I love it.
so we're trying to get the U.S. government, and so the pressure is on the U.S. government to say you got to donate your doses, and I say, look, we need 4 or 5 billion doses. Even if the U.S. gave away its entire stockpile tomorrow, it's not going to make that much of a dent. So that's, you know, I understand equity, and that's important, but the way to achieve equity is, you know, make our vaccine. We'll give it to you. We're not going to even sell it to you. We'll give it to you. Just make billions of doses of it, and it's easy to do because, well, I shouldn't trivialize. Not that it's easy, but it's not that difficult because it's an older technology. It's a high producing yeast strain. You can just make buckets of it, and I think we should try to do that.
So you said you had a question for us. What question did you have for us to field?
So the PBS NewsHour NPR Maris poll that I interviewed with Yamiche Alcindor, very smart lady at PBS, and you know, we talked about the poll, and it shows that what people call vaccine hesitancy or refusal in Black and Brown communities is declining. Maybe because of what you guys are doing, but it's gone down compared to what it was even this last December. And I guess the question, it's still higher than you'd like, but it's coming down. And I guess I'm asking you for some reality testing there. Does that sound right to you, or do you think that's not correct?
Doug, you have some insight?
Well, so mostly anecdotally, you know, in the kind of the ways in which I'm kind of plugged in and kind of have my finger on the pulse, it seems that people are more receptive. And again, this is prior to, you know, the news from this week about the Johnson & Johnson issues, but people are more receptive to having discussions about it, and kind of a social proof kind of effect at work where, you know, people have gotten it and they're sharing and promoting that they have, and it kind of reinforces that it's okay, especially in our communities. And you know, not so anecdotally, in looking at like of the vaccinated individuals that we have demographic data on, you know, I've seen the numbers tick up, the proportion of people of color grow a little bit in some of the CDC numbers. So a bit, you know, from a data perspective and a bit from an anecdotal perspective, I've seen a little bit of that, but nowhere near where I think we need to be to make sure that, you know, when we finally do reach herd immunity, it's you know, that proportion is also reflected in our smaller communities as well.
I got invited to by this pediatrician in Richmond, Virginia, Dr. Freeman, to talk to his church group, one of the historically important Black churches in Richmond, Virginia, the Providence Baptist Church, and much like this. And I was talking to the pastor, and I asked him a similar question. He said, yeah, he did think it was getting better. And then I asked him, what do you think? What's the reason for it? And he said something very interesting. He said, well, part of it's, you know, docs like you reaching out, but he offered that the clergy realized they had a problem on their hands, and they created this informal network of Black clergy across the country to work on this problem. And that made sense to me, that, it was, pastors of a lot of the Black churches, and really decided they're going to take ownership of this. And
I'd say there's several layers to this, and I think, like Doug, I'm probably speaking a little bit more anecdotally as well, but definitely seeing messaging coming from the faith-based leaders in our community, especially. A lot of us are drawn to our churches and our faith-based leaders. So having a unified message from that front has helped. But I think another key to this has been the fact that a lot of folks who are getting vaccinated are talking about being vaccinated very openly, talking about the side effects that they're seeing from the vaccinations. And so we're sort of normalizing what vaccination for COVID looks like. And we're seeing that our brothers, our sisters, our neighbors, our close friends are doing it. And because we see them doing it and being okay afterwards, it makes us more comfortable to go and do
right. Nothing terrible is happening. They complain. I was uncomfortable for a day, but people say, I can handle that. And I think you're right.
I will say, though, that one thing that has started to concern me of late, that I'm trying to start, figuring out how we could address, is that there is a contingent, I would say, in our community who has sort of, conflated a number of conspiracies around everything. And so there is a little bit of that in our community. I know it's really prominent among conservatives and sort of that QAnon community, but I think some of it's seeping over into our community too.
Well, also, the anti-vaccine groups have created this new documentary. I don't know if you've seen it. I think it's called Medical Racism or Medical Apartheid. I didn't see the movie.
I saw the link,
but the trailer, and and it shows, people getting the Pfizer BioNTech vaccine, and then it flips to Tuskegee and pictures from Tuskegee from the 40s and 50s, and the implication being that the Pfizer BioNTech vaccine is, Tuskegee experimentation. I mean, who needs that, right? I mean, so that's going to do a lot of damage too, I think.
Yeah. Well, we are so excited.
We still have our work cut out for us.
A lot of work. Yeah.
Indeed.
Yeah.
We're so excited that you joined us. We can't thank you. It's so timely, especially with this week's announcement. So thank you for coming on to.
Well, let's keep talking. I love talking to you guys, and I learned a lot, and we'll just keep pushing this thing.
Cool.
Yeah, so Dr. Hotez, thank you again for joining us. To our audience, unfortunately, Dr. Hotez is very, very busy, but we're thankful to get 30 minutes out of you. You've answered some very important questions for us. We want to thank everybody for coming and joining this conversation. At Hood Medicine, we want to bring you trusted individuals to provide you with facts and information to allow you to make the decisions necessary to keep you and your family safe, and thereby our neighborhood safe as well. Please follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter to support our effort, donate to our cause, or find out about our next events. Visit hoodmedicine.org, at Hood_medicine IG and Twitter, or Hood Medicine Initiative, all one word, on Facebook. Thank you again. And if you want to look for Dr. Hotez, who drops jewels all the time on Twitter, his handle is at Peter Hotez on Twitter. So please look for him as well.
Thanks.
Thank you so much. It's great talking to you guys.
Thank you. God bless.
Thank you, Dr. Hotez. Thank you.
Bye-bye. God bless.
Bye.
Bye-bye.